The purchase. The twin sons of Zyra. 9 burned red over the desert bazaar. Metal cages lined the dusty street, each filled with frightened creatures from 100 worlds. Traders shouted prices, their rough voices echoing through the air thick with smoke and despair. Among the cages sat a young alien girl named Lyra, her small hands gripping the cold metal bars. Her silver eyes, once bright, now dulled with fear. The marks on her wrists showed how long she had been a prisoner. She had been sold 3 times before, each time to someone worse than the last. And now she waited for another monster to claim her. When the crowd parted, a tall human walked into the market. He wore a simple black jacket and carried no weapon. His name was Ethan, a trader, or at least that was what people thought. His eyes scanned the cages until they stopped at Lyra. For a long moment, he said nothing, only stared. The trader beside her cage grinned. Rare species, half telepathic, very obedient once trained. Ethan didn't reply. He only placed a small metal chip on the table, a payment unit glowing blue. The trader's grin widened. She's yours now, human. Lyra's heart began to race. Her body trembled as the cage door creaked open. She expected to be dragged, beaten, or chained like before. But Ethan simply said, "Come," his voice calm, not cruel. She hesitated, then stepped out slowly, her bare feet sinking into the hot sand. He gave her a cloak, dark and soft, to shield her from the burning suns. She didn't understand. No one had ever given her anything but pain. She followed him quietly through the crowd, afraid to speak, afraid to hope. Back at the landing port, Ethan's ship waited, old, silver, and covered with dust. Lyra looked at it with dread, thinking it would be another prison. When they stepped inside, the lights flickered on softly, revealing clean floors and warm air. There were no chains, no cages, only a small cabin. Ethan pointed toward it and said, "You can rest there." Lyra froze, her mind spinning. Rest? She didn't understand what he meant. He noticed her confusion and added, "You're safe here." But the word safe felt strange to her ears, like a lie too kind to believe. When he brought her food, real food, not scraps, she refused to eat. Her body tensed, expecting it to be poisoned. Ethan didn't argue. He placed the plate gently on the table and walked away. For hours, she watched him repair a damaged circuit near the cockpit. He never once looked at her with disgust or ownership. He just worked silently, humming a tune she didn't recognize. That night, she sat in the corner of her cabin, clutching the blanket he had given. She didn't sleep. She waited for him to come back, to shout, to hurt her, to prove he was just like the others. But he never came. Morning came with soft light through the ship's window. Lyra peeked out of her cabin and saw Ethan making tea. The scent filled the air, warm, gentle, human. He looked up and smiled. "Good morning." She stepped back instantly, hitting the doorframe in fear. Ethan raised his hands, showing he meant no harm. "It's all right, you can sit." She didn't move, only watched him with wide eyes. Then he placed a cup on the table and said, "This one's for you." Steam rose from it, and the smell reminded her of something from long ago, her home before the war. Her throat tightened, but she said nothing. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the sound of the ship's engines. Ethan began explaining to her how things worked, not as a command, but as if he wanted her to learn. "This lever controls the gravity stabilizer," he said, showing her the panel. Lyra listened quietly, her curiosity fighting her fear. No one had ever explained anything to her before. She wondered why he cared, whether she understood. Every small kindness confused her more. It was as if he was rewriting what it meant to be owned. Later that evening, he noticed the bruises on her arms. Without a word, he brought a small medkit. Lyra tensed, ready to be struck, but instead, he gently placed a healing patch over her skin. The warmth of the medicine spread through her arm, easing the pain. Her eyes filled with tears she didn't want to show. She whispered, barely audible, "Why?" Ethan paused, his hand still. "Because no one deserves to be hurt," he said simply. Then he turned and walked back to the cockpit, leaving her stunned. Those words echoed in her mind long after he was gone. That night, for the first time in years, Lyra slept. Not because she trusted him, but because her body was too tired to keep fearing. Her dreams were strange, flashes of her past mixed with the sound of that human voice saying safe. When she woke, The blanket still covered her, tucked in gently. Her heart ached in confusion. Humans had destroyed her world, enslaved her people, and yet this one treated her like she mattered. It made no sense. She looked at her reflection in the mirror, eyes shimmering with uncertainty. Could kindness be real, or was it another trick before the pain returned? Outside, Ethan adjusted the ship's navigation system, unaware of the storm he had stirred inside her heart. He had bought her to save her, but Lyra didn't know that yet. To her, this was only the beginning of another chapter of fear. But deep down, something in her had already begun to change. Something small, fragile, and warm. The first spark of hope. The fear. Lyra awoke to the soft hum of the ship, the vibration steady beneath her hands. For a moment she forgot where she was, until the scent of metal and human oil brought her back. The nightmare of the marketplace still echoed in her chest. She touched the collar that was no longer there and felt strange emptiness. Freedom felt heavier than chains. From the corridor came faint mechanical sounds, tools clicking, wires sparking. Ethan was fixing something again, his calm voice murmuring numbers to himself. Lyra sat quietly at the doorway, watching him from behind the wall. His movements were precise, almost gentle, nothing like the humans she once knew. Still, her heart refused to believe what her eyes saw. Every kindness made her more afraid, not less. She whispered to herself, "No one helps for nothing. No one saves without wanting something back." When Ethan turned slightly, she flinched and hid. He noticed the shadow and spoke softly. "You can come out, Lyra." She stayed silent, trembling, her breath shallow. "I'm not going to hurt you," he added, wiping grease from his hands. Those words meant little. Everyone who ever heard her had said the same before. He sighed and went back to work, giving her space instead of forcing her. That small act confused her even more. Hours later, hunger won over fear. She crept toward the small kitchen and found the leftover food Ethan had left on the table. It was still warm. Her fingers hesitated above the plate, remembering the times food had been used as a trap. But her stomach ached too much. Slowly, she took a bite. It tasted real. Not bitter, not drugged, real. She froze in disbelief, tears stinging her eyes because something so simple felt like a miracle. Ethan entered quietly, not wanting to scare her. She jumped and dropped the spoon. "Easy," he said quickly, "hands up, it's okay." He noticed how she shook and lowered his voice even more. "I just needed a drink." Lyra nodded slowly, backing away. He poured himself water, drank, and then left without another word. For the rest of the night, she sat by the window, staring at the stars beyond the glass. So many lights, so much silence. Maybe somewhere out there, her people still lived, maybe not. But for now, this human ship was her small cage of safety and confusion. The next morning, Ethan handed her a small device. "It's a translator," he said. "It'll help you understand me better." Lyra stared at it, as if it might explode. He demonstrated, pressing a button, and the device repeated his words in her alien tongue. Her eyes widened slightly. Understanding him made his kindness even scarier. Now she could hear his tone clearly, and it sounded sincere. But sincerity was dangerous, because it made her want to believe him. Later that day, the ship shook violently, alarms blaring red lights across the hall. Lyra screamed, clutching the wall as Ethan rushed to the controls. "Meteor fragments," he said quickly, "hold on." The ship jolted again, metal shrieking as debris hit the outer hull. Lyra fell, hitting her arm against the corner of a chair. Pain shot through her, and for a heartbeat she thought Ethan would ignore her. But he was suddenly there, helping her up, shielding her body with his. The tremors stopped after a few moments, silence returning slowly. Ethan checked her wound, eyes full of worry. "You're bleeding," he said softly. "Let me see." She tried to pull away, whispering, "Don't touch me." He stopped instantly, stepped back, and said, "All right." Then he placed the med patch beside her instead, letting her choose. The gesture broke something inside her, the habit of expecting cruelty. When the ship finally stabilized, she sat staring at the small patch in her hands. No one had ever asked her permission before. After a long moment, she pressed it on herself, feeling the warmth heal the wound. Through the glass reflection, she saw Ethan working quietly again. She didn't know why, but she whispered, "Thank you." He didn't respond, but she saw the faint smile at the corner of his mouth. Days passed. Lyra began helping in small ways, cleaning, organizing tools, adjusting wires. At first she did it silently, out of fear of punishment if she refused. But Ethan never ordered her, never shouted. Sometimes he would tell her about the stars they passed, about Earth, oceans, and music. She listened, pretending not to care, though every story made her heart ache. She had never known a world where people built instead of destroyed. Still, every time he stepped too close, she would move back. Fear lived in her like a second heartbeat, impossible to silence. One evening, when Ethan returned from a supply post, Lyra noticed bruises on his arm. He had defended her again. Some locals had called her a thing, not a person. She overheard it when the translator replayed the recorded memory from his wristband. He had said, "She's under my protection. Speak that way again and you'll answer to me." Those words echoed in her chest like thunder. Why would a human risk himself for her? Her mind couldn't find an answer. That night, she couldn't sleep, her thoughts fighting between fear and a growing warmth she didn't want to name. The next morning, she found a small flower near her cabin door, real, fragile, growing in a pot. A message on the translator read, "For your room, it's from Earth." She touched the petals gently, her fingers trembling. It was soft, alive, full of color she hadn't seen since childhood. For the first time, she smiled. A small, uncertain smile, before quickly hiding it from him. He saw it anyway, but pretended not to notice, letting her have her moment of quiet peace. Still, the fear never fully left her. Every kind act only made the question louder in her head. Why is he doing this? What does he want from me? She didn't know that Ethan's reasons ran deeper than pity. He had seen his own sister sold during the Terran Wars, and he had promised himself never again. But Lyra didn't know that yet. All she knew was that this strange human bought her not to hurt her, and somehow, that scared her even more than cruelty ever could. The trust. 3 weeks had passed since Ethan bought Lyra from the slave bazaar. The ship now drifted quietly between moons, its hull reflecting pale blue light. Inside, the air was warmer, calmer, almost peaceful. But peace didn't erase fear. It only gave it space to breathe. Lyra still woke at night, gasping from dreams where chains closed around her wrists. Yet every morning she found the same thing, a meal waiting, a soft blanket, and Ethan's calm voice saying, "Good morning." One day, while he was repairing a fusion valve, the ship's sensors began to beep in warning. Lyra's ears twitched. Danger. Ethan rushed to the control panel, muttering, "Raiders." Through the viewport, black ships appeared, scavengers from the rim, ruthless and hungry. Lyra froze, her whole body trembling, memories flashing like fire in her mind. Humans had hurt her before, but not like the ones coming now. Ethan grabbed his blaster and shouted, "Stay back, Lyra." But she didn't move, her eyes locked on the stars that now burned with enemy fire. The first shot hit the hull, shaking the ship violently. Lights flickered, alarms screamed, metal cracked under pressure. Ethan pulled a lever, sending the vessel into evasive mode. Lyra fell to the ground, clutching her head, hearing her own heartbeat pounding louder than the explosions. Then she felt strong hands pull her up, Ethan's hands, shielding her as sparks rained from the ceiling. He shouted, "Hold on," and turned the ship sharply into a gas cloud. The engines groaned, the gravity faltered, but they escaped the first wave. For a moment there was silence. Ethan's shoulder bled where shrapnel had hit him, but he kept moving. Lyra stared at him in disbelief. He was wounded, yet his first thought was her safety. When another blast rocked the ship, she screamed, "They'll kill us." Ethan's voice was steady. "Not if I can help it." He fired the rear cannons manually, his eyes burning with determination. Lyra crawled beside him, terrified but unable to leave his side. Something deep inside her, something she thought had died long ago, began to stir. The raiders boarded, metal claws tearing through the outer door. Ethan shoved a blaster into Lyra's hands. "If they reach you, shoot." She shook her head violently. "I can't." "You can," he said firmly. "Trust me." Those words hit harder than the gunfire outside. Trust. She hadn't trusted anyone since her childhood. But when the first raider broke in, growling in a tongue of cruelty, Ethan stood in front of her again, taking the first strike to protect her. Blood ran down his arm, yet he fought like a storm, every blow carrying purpose. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to protect. Lyra's trembling hand lifted the blaster, her vision blurred with tears. The raider aimed at Ethan's back, ready to fire. Something inside her snapped. A surge of light flashed from her palms, her telepathic power awakening. A wave of energy burst out, throwing the raider across the room. Silence followed, broken only by the ship's low hum. Ethan turned, staring at her in shock and awe. "You saved me," he whispered. Lyra dropped the weapon, her body shaking. "I didn't mean to." But he smiled, a tired, bleeding smile. "Thank you anyway." They collapsed together on the floor, exhaustion replacing fear. Ethan bandaged his wound roughly, then hers, without saying much. Lyra kept watching him, her silver eyes full of questions she couldn't ask. Why did he save her again? Why didn't he leave her behind? She reached out uncertainly, touching the edge of the bandage on his arm. He looked up, surprised, but didn't move away. That small touch broke the invisible wall between them. For the first time, Lyra didn't pull back. Later, as the ship floated in quiet darkness, she sat beside him near the observation window. The stars shimmered like distant fires. Ethan said softly, "You're brave, Lyra." She frowned. "Brave?" "I was terrified." "Courage isn't the absence of fear," he replied. "It's choosing to act even when you're afraid." She stared at him, the meaning sinking deep. No one had ever explained life to her like that. Simple, human, true. Over the next few days, the silence between them began to change. Before, it had been heavy with fear. Now it was filled with quiet understanding. When Ethan worked, Lyra handed him tools. When she cooked, he helped without asking. He started teaching her small things, reading human text, repairing circuits, naming constellations. At first she did it to repay him, but slowly, she began to enjoy learning. Her laughter returned in tiny moments, awkward but real. And every time she laughed, Ethan's heart eased just a little more. One evening, while cleaning the storage deck, Lyra found an old photo, a human girl smiling beside Ethan. She asked softly, "Your mate?" He smiled faintly. "My sister." Lyra tilted her head. "Where is she now?" He looked away, his eyes darkening. "Gone." The silence that followed was gentle, full of shared pain. Lyra didn't ask more. She simply said, "I'm sorry." He nodded. "That's why I couldn't leave you there." Those words finally answered the question she had feared to ask, why he saved her. Not because he wanted to own her, but because once he couldn't save someone else. That night, Lyra stood at the window again, watching the stars pass. Her reflection looked different now, less fragile, more alive. For the first time, she didn't see herself as property. She whispered, "Thank you, Ethan," though he couldn't hear. And deep inside, the wall of fear began to crumble. In its place grew something new, trust, soft and uncertain, but real. The next morning, when Ethan offered her breakfast, she didn't hide or flinch. She smiled, shyly, and said, "Good morning." Ethan nearly dropped his cup in surprise, then laughed quietly. The sound filled the cabin like sunlight breaking through clouds. It was the first morning that didn't feel like survival, it felt like living. And neither of them knew it yet. But this fragile bond they built today would one day save entire worlds. The healing. The stars outside drifted like slow-moving fireflies, lighting the endless dark. Inside Ethan's ship, the quiet hum of the engines felt almost like a heartbeat. For the first time, Lyra no longer jumped at every sound. She had begun to move freely through the halls, her silver eyes curious instead of afraid. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but it had begun to loosen its grip. In its place, something fragile began to grow, a calm she didn't recognize. Ethan noticed the small changes first. The way she no longer hid behind doors. The way she hummed softly while cleaning the console. He never mentioned it, afraid that naming peace might break it. But every time he saw her smile, even for a heartbeat, he felt the universe become lighter. One afternoon, while traveling near the nebula fields, the ship's system glitched. The navigation froze, and Ethan crawled beneath the control panel, tools scattered around him. Lyra watched from the side, fascinated. When he cursed softly at a loose wire, she knelt down, holding the flashlight for him. He looked up, amused. "You're getting good at this." She tilted her head, unsure whether that was praise or teasing. "I only watch you." He smiled. Watching is how learning begins. Her lips curved slightly, a smile shy as dawn, and for once, it didn't fade too fast. Days passed in quiet rhythm. Ethan taught her how to adjust the oxygen regulators, how to repair minor leaks. Lyra found comfort in the order of his world. Machines made sense. They broke. They were fixed. They didn't lie. Humans, however, were still a mystery. But Ethan was rewriting what it meant to be one, slowly, patiently, every single day. One night, Lyra woke to a sound she didn't know, soft music. She followed it to the cockpit, where Ethan sat staring at the stars. A small hologram projected an old Earth song, the melody full of warmth and ache. He didn't see her at first, lost in memory. When he noticed her, he smiled faintly. Couldn't sleep? She shook her head. That sound, it's beautiful. It's called music, he said. We used to fill our worlds with it before the wars. Lyra sat beside him, the rhythm touching something deep inside her chest. It reminded her of the river songs her mother once sang before the humans came. She whispered, "My people had music too." "Then you should sing again someday," Ethan said softly. Her throat tightened. "I forgot how." "Then I'll help you remember," he replied, and turned up the volume. The notes wrapped around them like a promise, quiet, wordless, but powerful. From that night, she started humming again, small, broken tunes that slowly found shape. Ethan didn't interrupt, didn't correct, he just listened. Sometimes he joined with soft tapping on metal, creating rhythm between human and alien. The sound filled the ship, replacing silence with something alive. It was healing in the purest form, music born from pain, rebuilt by trust. But peace never lasted long in their world. When they landed on an outpost for supplies, the local guards stared at Lyra with cold eyes. One spat near her feet, calling her a pet. Lyra froze, her old fear flooding back. Before she could step aside, Ethan stood in front of her, his voice sharp as steel. "She's not property." The guard laughed. "Then what is she, your toy?" Ethan didn't speak again. He just handed over double credits and said, "We'll buy from someone else." Lyra followed him silently back to the ship, her chest burning. Once inside, she whispered, "You shouldn't have done that." He turned, confused. "Why?" "They'll hate you now," she said, "for protecting me." He smiled gently. "Let them hate. It changes nothing." For the rest of the flight, she said nothing, but her heart couldn't stay silent anymore. That night, she sat beside him and finally asked, "Why are you kind to me?" Ethan leaned back, thinking, "Because once, someone was kind to me when I didn't deserve it." Lyra frowned. "And did it change you?" He looked at her, eyes reflecting stars, completely. The silence that followed was full of unspoken things. Pain, healing, gratitude, and something new neither dared to name. As days turned into weeks, Ethan began showing her the constellations of Earth's myths. "This one's Orion," he said, tracing glowing lines across the window. "A warrior of the skies." Lyra smiled softly. "And this one?" He pointed to another. "That's Lyra, the harp of the gods." Her breath caught. "Lyra?" He nodded. "Yes, the same name as yours." She looked at the stars, eyes glimmering. "Maybe I was named for music too." "Then you were never meant to live in silence," he said quietly. That night, she didn't dream of cages. She dreamed of stars singing her name. In the following days, Ethan fell sick, exhaustion, maybe from wounds never healed properly. Lyra stayed by his side, cooling his forehead with damp cloths. He murmured something half-conscious, "Don't let them find you." Her heart clenched. "I won't leave you," she whispered. When he opened his eyes hours later, the first thing he saw was her hand holding his. He smiled weakly. "You're learning fast." She replied, voice trembling. "You said kindness changes people." He looked at her with tired warmth. "Then it's working." When he finally recovered, the first thing he did was laugh. Really laugh. The sound made Lyra laugh too, a soft, surprised sound that filled the ship like morning light. From that day onward, the air between them carried something unspoken yet alive. Lyra no longer saw herself as a slave or a rescued victim. She saw herself as part of something, a home, a beginning, a promise. And though she didn't know it yet, this small piece they built together would soon be tested by the galaxy itself. But for now, under the quiet stars, they simply sat side by side. a human and an alien who had both learned to heal, one act of kindness at a time. The escape. The quiet days aboard the ship were ending, though neither of them knew it yet. Lyra stood at the window, watching a storm of blue gas swirl outside the nebula. Ethan had promised they would reach a safe colony soon, a place where no one cared about species or status. She wanted to believe him, she really did. But deep inside, something heavy pulled at her heart, the feeling that peace never stayed long in her life. That night, the warning alarms broke the silence. The ship's system flashed red. The voice of the AI spoke coldly. Incoming military vessels, Terran command. Lyra froze, eyes wide. They found us. Ethan rushed to the control deck, his expression changing from calm to fierce. How? She asked, trembling. He didn't answer, just pulled the manual override, steering the ship away from the signal. But the scanners locked on. They weren't pirates this time, they were soldiers. And this time, they came not for her, but for him. Through the comm line, a voice boomed. Captain Ethan Voss, you are charged with harboring illegal life forms and treason against the human confederacy. Surrender immediately. Lyra felt the air leave her lungs. They're going to kill you. Lyra felt the air leave her lungs. They're going to kill you. Ethan's jaw tightened. Not if I can get you out first. He typed a command, opening the emergency pod bay. Lyra grabbed his arm, shaking her head. No, I'm not leaving you. He looked at her then, the kind of look that said more than words ever could. You have to, Lyra. Your hope now, not a prisoner. The soldiers fired a warning shot, the blast grazing their hull. The lights flickered, sparks rained from the ceiling. Ethan pushed her toward the escape pod. Get inside. Lyra resisted, tears in her eyes. I can help you. Please. You already did, he whispered, pressing the launch sequence. The pod door slid open with a mechanical hiss. She stared at him through the rising mist, her heart shattering with every second. Why are you doing this? She cried. He smiled softly, blood trickling from a cut on his temple. Because you taught me what kindness really means. The explosion hit the ship's rear engine, shaking the floor under their feet. Ethan slammed the pod's door shut, ignoring her screams. Through the small window, she saw him one last time, standing in smoke and fire. He mouthed the words, "Live free," before pressing the final button. The pod launched with a roar, cutting through the chaos, spinning into the cold void. Lyra pressed her hands to the glass, sobbing, "Ethan." But her voice vanished into the stars. The pod drifted far from the battle, guided by coordinates he had set for her. She watched the ship shrink into a glowing spark. Then a massive explosion bloomed in silence. Beautiful, terrible, final. Her breath caught. Her world crumbled. It felt like losing everything all over again. Only this time it hurt even more. Because this time, someone had given his life for her. Hours turned into days. The pod's oxygen filters hissed weakly, the lights dimmed. Lyra curled up on the floor, whispering his name again and again. Each time she said it, she remembered the moments that built her new world. His laughter, his music, his patience. She wanted to hate him for leaving her, but she couldn't. Because even in his last breath, he had chosen her life over his own. When the pod finally landed on a small forest planet, the doors hissed open with a rush of cold air. Lyra stepped out, weak, bruised, and broken. Green trees stretched above her, the first real nature she had seen in years. The sunlight touched her silver skin, and she felt warmth again. For hours she wandered aimlessly, hearing the wind whisper through alien leaves. Somewhere inside, something told her Ethan might still be alive. The explosion had looked final, but she refused to believe it. Humans were stubborn creatures. He was the proof of that. She built a small shelter using scraps from the pod. Every night, she sat beneath the twin moons, whispering stories to the stars. She sang the song Ethan had once played, her voice soft but strong. Each note carried a promise. She would live, she would fight, she would keep his kindness alive. The galaxy might call her a runaway slave, but she knew better. She was a survivor, a witness, a messenger of the lesson one human had taught her. Weeks later, a small group of alien freedom fighters found her camp. They recognized her face from wanted posters. The human's pet, they sneered. But when she spoke, they fell silent. "I'm no one's pet," she said firmly. "I'm someone he saved. and now I'll save others." They saw the fire in her eyes and offered her a place among them. From that moment, Lyra's journey changed. She was no longer running, she was leading. Every mission, every rescue, every act of mercy she did carried Ethan's memory in it. One night, as they prepared for another raid against the slavers, she stood by the campfire and looked to the stars. Her voice trembled. "If you're out there, Ethan, I kept my promise." The wind moved softly through the trees, carrying a faint echo, a warmth that brushed her cheek like a whisper. And though she couldn't see him, she smiled, believing he was still watching somewhere beyond the galaxies. That night, the stars seemed brighter than ever, each one glowing like the memory of a man who had chosen kindness over cruelty. Lyra closed her eyes, whispering the same words he once said to her. "No one deserves to be hurt." Then she stood tall beneath the alien sky, a symbol of hope born from human mercy. And somewhere far away, in the wreckage of a forgotten ship, a faint signal pulsed once, steady, alive, waiting. The return. Months had passed since the night the sky burned with Ethan's ship. Lyra had become someone else, not the frightened slave from the bazaar, but a leader of the lost. Her silver eyes now carried fire instead of fear. She trained every day with the rebels, learning strategy, learning war, learning how to save instead of just survive. But no matter how many battles she fought, one thought never left her heart. What if Ethan was still alive? The rebellion had grown under her voice. Aliens from a dozen oppressed worlds joined her cause. They called her the kind star, the alien who learned mercy from a human. Every mission she led ended not in vengeance, but in liberation. She always said the same words before battle. "We fight not to destroy them, but to free ourselves from hate." Those words came from Ethan, though none of them knew. One cold evening, while studying intercepted data from the Terran fleets, Lyra froze. Among the encrypted transmissions was a faint distress signal. The origin code, old, damaged, but unmistakable. Her heart pounded as the letters flashed on screen. EV-01, SOS. Ethan Voss. Her hands shook, the console flickering with interference. It wasn't a ghost signal, it was a heartbeat across space. He was alive. She ran to Commander Ryan, her closest ally. "We have to go after him," she said, voice trembling. Ryan frowned. "Lyra, that's deep inside Terran space. It's suicide." "I don't care," she whispered. "He saved me. Now it's my turn." The commander looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. "Then we'll go together," he said. And just like that, the rebellion changed course. The mission that began with survival turned into a rescue. They flew in a stolen Terran freighter disguised as a supply ship. The journey through the black sectors was silent, tense. Lyra stood by the viewport, her fingers tracing invisible constellations. Every star reminded her of his promise, live free. Now she wanted to say back, you don't get to die alone. After days of travel, they reached the coordinates, a frozen moon on the edge of the Perseus Rift. The surface shimmered with ice and buried metal. Scanners detected weak life readings beneath the crust. Lyra's pulse raced. "He's there," she whispered. They landed near a crashed hull half buried in frost. It was Ethan's ship, broken, blackened, but still holding form. Her breath caught at the sight of the symbol on its side, a hand reaching toward a star, the same emblem Ethan had carved for her once. Her knees almost gave way. Inside, the air was cold and thin. She moved through the corridors like a ghost among ghosts. Every surface carried burn marks, frozen wires, and memories of that night. Then she found it, a small cryostasis pod flickering weakly. The screen read, "Vital signs critical, human life form preserved." Her trembling hand pressed the release. The pod hissed open, fog spilling across the floor. And there he was, pale, scarred, but breathing. "Ethan." She fell to her knees beside him, tears freezing on her cheeks. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice breaking, "you kept your promise." His eyes fluttered open slowly, unfocused at first. When they met hers, a faint smile crossed his face. "Lyra," he murmured, voice hoarse, "you found me." She laughed and cried at the same time. "I told you, humans are stubborn." He coughed weakly. "So are aliens who learn from them." They both laughed, tired, broken, alive. Ryan's team carried Ethan back to the ship, wrapping him in thermal blankets. He was barely conscious, but every time Lyra touched his hand, his breathing steadied. When they left the frozen moon behind, the engines roared like the heartbeat of destiny itself. For the first time since the rebellion began, Lyra felt whole. Days later, Ethan sat in the med bay, still weak but smiling. He listened as Lyra told him everything. The rebellion, the rescues, the hope she spread. "You changed the galaxy," he whispered. She shook her head. "No, you did. I only carried it forward." He smiled faintly. "Guess kindness is contagious." Lyra laughed, wiping her tears. The universe finally caught it. As news of his survival spread, the rebellion's spirit ignited like wildfire. Humans who once served the Confederacy began defecting. They saw Ethan, a human who fought for alien freedom, as a symbol of what their kind could still be. Together, Ethan and Lyra united both sides under one flag, the Alliance of Equals. They turned the old symbol of a reaching hand into their banner. It no longer belonged to one species. It belonged to hope itself. One evening, long after the last battle had been won, they stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt ship. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, vast and quiet. Ethan leaned against the railing, his voice soft. "You remember the day I bought you?" Lyra smiled gently. "I remember thinking you were going to hurt me." "And now?" he asked. She looked at him, her eyes glowing like silver moons. "Now I know you bought me to show me freedom." He nodded slowly. "And you showed me what love really means." Outside, the stars shimmered brighter than ever. The galaxy that once thrived on fear now echoed with stories of a human and an alien who defied everything. They were no longer master and slave, savior and saved. They were partners, equals, legends. And though time would one day take their names, the kindness they sparked would burn forever. For in the endless dark between stars, one truth had become clear. The greatest power in the universe was never strength, never war, never dominance. It was compassion. It was the courage to care, even when the galaxy said you shouldn't. And together, Ethan and Lyra carried that light wherever they went, hand in hand, heart to heart, human and alien, united by kindness. The legacy. Years passed like waves in an endless ocean. Empires rose and fell, flags changed, borders dissolved. But one story remained, whispered from planet to planet, from human lips to alien tongues. The story of a human who bought a slave not to own her, but to free her. The story of Ethan and Lyra. They had long since left the front lines. The Alliance of Equals had grown beyond anything they dreamed. Stations shimmered with banners of peace. Trade ships carried both human and alien crews. The galaxy was far from perfect, but it was healing, slowly, stubbornly, beautifully. And in a quiet valley on the green world of Aurelia, two small homes sat beneath silver skies. Ethan walked slower now, his hair streaked with gray. Lyra moved beside him, her once metallic skin now softened with age, her eyes still bright with light. They didn't talk much anymore. They didn't need to. Their silence was filled with understanding. Every glance, every small smile was a language of its own. Sometimes, as the twin suns set behind the hills, they sat on the porch listening to wind through alien trees. And Ethan would whisper, "You remember that marketplace?" Lyra would smile. "I remember thinking you were another monster." He chuckled softly. "And you still followed me." She laughed. Maybe destiny has strange taste. But their quiet peace wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of their legend. Children came to their valley from every corner of the galaxy. Some human, some alien, some both, all carrying questions in their hearts. "Is it true you fought against the Confederacy?" one asked. "Is it true you saved each other?" another whispered. Ethan would nod, eyes kind. "It's true." Lyra would add softly, "But what matters more is why we did it." Then she would tell them, not about war or weapons, but about the small moments that changed everything. About the meal shared with fear, the music that healed wounds, the trust that grew from kindness. Over time, their home became a sanctuary, a place where no one asked what species you were, only whether you were hungry or cold. Lyra tended the garden, planting flowers from every world they had once visited. Ethan fixed old machines, teaching children how to build instead of break. And sometimes at night, when the stars came out, they played music again, The same melody that once filled a lonely ship, now echoing across a peaceful world. As the years drifted on, Ethan's health began to fade. One evening, Lyra found him sitting beneath the great tree they had planted together. He looked at the stars above and smiled. "They're the same ones we saw back then." She knelt beside him, holding his hand. "Do you regret anything?" He shook his head slowly. "Only that I didn't find you sooner." Tears welled in her silver eyes, but she smiled. "You found me exactly when I needed you." He squeezed her hand weakly. "Then I guess I did something right." When he finally closed his eyes that night, he wasn't alone. Lyra sat beside him until the twin suns rose, her hand never leaving his. And when the first light touched his face, she whispered, "Sleep well, my human." The wind carried her words upward, wrapping them around the stars like a promise. Years later, after she too was gone, travelers still came to that valley. They found two graves under the great tree, side by side. One marked with a small human insignia, the other with alien runes. Between them grew a single flower with silver petals and a golden stem, a cross of both worlds. No one planted it, but it never stopped blooming. Children who visited would leave pebbles and small carvings shaped like open hands. Teachers told the story in schools, not as history, but as a lesson. They said, "Once there was a man who showed kindness to a stranger, and that kindness changed the stars." And in every corner of the galaxy, where hatred still tried to survive, someone would whisper their names, Ethan and Lyra. A reminder that mercy is not weakness, but strength. That love is not bound by skin, or blood, or species. That one act of compassion can rewrite the fate of worlds. Centuries later, their story became a myth. Statues were built on human worlds and alien moons alike. One hand carved of stone reaching toward another of crystal, the symbol of the alliance. And beneath it, words engraved in both languages. Kindness is the bridge between stars. And somewhere beyond time, beyond the reach of gravity or death, in a place where souls burn brighter than suns, two lights still travel side by side, one gold, one silver, laughing softly as they move through eternity. Together, forever, human and alien. Ethan and Lyra, the ones who taught a galaxy what kindness truly means.